Welcome to the Midwestern Regional Climate Center's Vegetation Impact Program's Frost Freeze Training Webinar for local contributors of plant vulnerability status and information. Before we get too far into the webinar, I want to verify that people can hear me and respond. So we're going to do a little test. If you can just raise your hand through the go-to meeting, not just at your desk, I won't be able to see that, then we'll see. All right, we've gotten a couple people raising their hands, so that tells me people can hear me. Wonderful. Well, I'm Beth Hall, the director of the MRCC, and I'm here with Molly Willison, MRCC's Extension and Outreach Climatologist. This is one of 2 training webinars to help users learn more about the Frost Freeze Project and how to help better monitor their surrounding environment for the potential risk and susceptibility of frost freeze damage to plants. This particular webinar is designed for subscribers who can provide input on local vegetation and its susceptibility to freeze events. The other webinar in this series is designed for the National Weather Service forecasters to better coordinate and communicate when to issue freeze-related forecast headlines depending upon surrounding plant growth conditions. With the go-to meeting, we have a question box, so if at any time you have a question, feel free to type it in. And at the end of the webinar, we will open it to questions where we'll invite you to raise your hand if you have a question so that we can unmute you and everyone can hear what you have to ask. So what is the Frost Freeze Guidance Project? Well, the MRCC is excited to be able to provide a forum among weather forecasters, climatologists, vegetation experts, and plant enthusiasts to improve communication about the state of vegetation and its susceptibility to potentially damaging low air temperatures. The Frost Freeze Project is part of a larger initiative that was recently launched by the MRCC called the Vegetation Impact Program, or VIP. The VIP includes the same collaborators as the Frost Freeze Guidance Project. Its mission is to provide the best possible climatological resources for stakeholders to continually monitor and understand the state of the vegetation climate environment. Other VIP projects in development include a stress degree day product and a Keach-Byram drought index product. We hope that VIP continues to expand based upon the needs and demands of the vegetation community across the nation. Freeze events can cause devastating impacts on local vegetation during the growing season. The freezes of 2007 and 2012 are examples of such events. Forecasters want to issue freeze headlines to warn the public of a potential freeze event. However, when to start and stop issuing these headlines throughout the year are often a challenge. The environment needs to warrant these alerts, and without expert input on the state of plants and their vulnerability to freeze events, the headlines aren't as valuable. While forecasters can use climatologically determined dates for when the first or last potentially damaging freeze of a growing season occurs, differences in weather and farming from one season to the next can play a large role in the timing of freeze susceptibility. Extreme or unusual seasons are often most dangerous because the weather does not often conform well to the climatological dates of the first or the last freeze. The MRCC has been monitoring freeze events in the fall and spring for several years. However, there is still a need to communicate the vulnerability of local plants to freeze with the issuance of freeze awareness headlines. Therefore, an email listserv was established as a way to communicate between all project participants on the status of their local vegetation climate environment. The MRCC also developed a number of operational products, including graphs, static maps, and GIS-based web applications on a website to help monitor the environment. And finally, since one of the main goals of this project is to receive guidance from the National Weather Service offices and local contributors, a guidance input form was created. This form is a place where listserv members can provide information about their area to help guide whether or not freeze headlines should be issued if a freeze event looks to be imminent. Online impact forms were also developed where listserv members can provide impact information after a damaging freeze event. We're going to explore these resources and how to fill out these forms in the second half of the webinar in just a few minutes. This project has 2 main member groups. The first member group is the National Weather Service, which we'll talk about shortly. The other member group is local contributors, which encompass university extension specialists, climatologists, horticulture growers, farmers, other vegetation experts like master gardeners, and so on. The role of the local contributor is to provide insight as to whether or not vegetation in their geographic area is susceptible to freezing temperatures. They do this by indicating yes, no, or maybe for whether or not a freeze or frost headline should be issued should freezing temperatures be in the forecast, and also updating these guidance forms as conditions change throughout the year. Another component to the role of the local contributor is to provide expert information not typically known outside the vegetation community, like at what critical temperature is the vegetation most vulnerable. This slide shows a few examples of great local contributor involvement from last season. This report is from Mark Longstroth, a Michigan State Extension Specialist, on May 7th. He indicates that fruit trees were blooming and will be damaged by temperatures below 28 degrees Fahrenheit, noting that critical temperatures of 28 degrees is very important and typically not known by those outside of the vegetation community. Another example is from just a few days later on the 9th, when Mark provided the listserv with a table showing the average bloom dates for the last 29 years in southwest Michigan for various fruit types. The response from this information showed support from the Weather Service. Todd Shea from the Weather Service responded by email and said, "This is great data. I love to see more ag-based input like this. Thanks." So for the forecasting participants, what is the role of the National Weather Service? The main goal of this project was to increase communication and knowledge among not only Weather Service offices but also local contributors. Therefore, one of the roles of the Weather Service is to use the resources available, such as the climate monitoring maps and guidance input from local contributors, and neighboring Weather Service offices to help determine whether frost freeze headlines are needed in their county warning area. Once the Weather Service office decides whether or not to start or stop issuing headlines for a season, the goal is to communicate that decision via the online guidance form in order to best coordinate with neighboring offices. It is important to update these guidance forms as needed to keep the information as current as possible. This first example from last spring is from a Weather Service contributor in Grand Rapids, Michigan, indicating that his office has begun its annual frost freeze warning program effective May 6th. He indicated that this decision was made because it is their understanding that many fruit-bearing vegetation are beginning to blossom, which is considering the great local information supplied by Southwest Michigan local contributors. This next example is another one showing great local information from the Kansas City office, indicating that they will be issuing freeze advisories because many of the farmers have begun planting over the past week. The posting also indicated that flowering trees have mostly leafed out, so that is no longer an issue for most of the county warning area, except maybe the extreme northern part. So what are the benefits of being involved with this project as a local contributor? Well, there's that big picture. As a local contributor, you are providing very valuable information to increase the understanding and awareness of damaging freeze events across not only your region, but the country as well. By providing the National Weather Service input on susceptibility of vegetation, frost freeze headlines and coordination between offices will improve, therefore benefiting growers by giving advanced and more accurate warning of potentially damaging low air temperatures and allowing them to possibly mitigate those effects. You also have knowledge and access to useful climatology tools and other freeze products looking at increased susceptibility over the next few days based on the forecast. The products may become more valuable to you in the future when we expand the selection to more real-time hourly data products. These tools are also resources that you can share with growers and farmers, especially if you are extension personnel that are working with these groups. Finally, this project provides a place for you to report impact experienced during freeze events and also see other impacts across the region. While many of the online products and tools are available online for anyone to see, one must be a project subscriber in order to post and share information about the current vulnerability to a potential freeze event. To subscribe, simply send an email to listserv@listserv.illinois.edu, and then in the body of the email type the words subscribe, freeze list, and then your first and last name. Now I'm going to turn it over to Molly so that she can give a live tour of our website and explain how to use some of the products.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Let me open up the web page here real quick. Okay, so as Beth said, I'm going to give you a tour of some of the different products and tools that are available and also walk you through how to fill out some of the forms that she mentioned. So this is the main Vegetation Impact Program page. And from here, you can access the frost freeze guidance page. And on the main page, this is where you have access to the forms, to the members list, to the static maps, and also the GIS interface maps, which we're all going to look at here in a second. Before we do that, I wanted to real quick just show you a couple of different pages that you can access from this home page, the first of which is the About page, which is where you can learn more about the project, a quick summary. So if you have anyone that you're interested in sharing information about this project with, this is a great page that you can point them to. We also have information on how to subscribe to the project. So if you forget or you wanted to share this with someone else, this is a page that you can go to as well. We also have the training page, which after this webinar is done, we will post the recording for this webinar on this training page. The one that occurred on Tuesday for the National Weather Service is already posted and can be downloaded. We also have materials on this page, which right now is a brochure about the project, and it is available in PDF format, so you can download it and print it and hand it out to people to share information about this project. Okay, so let me go back to the main page real quick. And as Beth said, one of the main ways that you can contribute as a local contributor to this project is by submitting guidance on whether or not vegetation is susceptible to freezing air temperatures in your region. So real quick, I'm going to walk you through how to fill out the guidance form to provide this information. So you do have to be a member of the listserv. So if you are not one already, once you subscribe, we will add you to this database. So on the main page, you can see you have the option to either enter a guidance or impact form, or you can view the reports. So we're going to view the reports in a second, but let's go ahead and just enter a form right now. So select Go. And you can see that you have two different types of forms. The first is the Freeze Advisory Guidance Form, which is the one that I just mentioned, which is what you use to submit information for your area on whether or not vegetation is susceptible. The second form is the Freeze Impact Report, which is what you would use to submit any impacts that have occurred after a damaging freeze. So we're first going to fill out the Freeze Advisory Guidance Form. You can choose to look at the counties either by state, by crop reporting district, or by National Weather Service county warning area. Let's go ahead and select state for right now and say Get Form. And the map on the right, if you click on the map, it enlarges it to a bigger map where you actually have the county names if you're not already familiar. And so with the counties, you can either select individual counties or you can select all counties. So just for the example, I'm just going to select a couple. And then where you submit the guidance is here in this first area. Oops, sorry about that. So as a local contributor, you have the option to either submit no, maybe, or yes for whether you believe that freeze advisory should be issued by the National Weather Service. If you select no freeze advisory needed, you're indicating that no vegetation is susceptible and therefore you do not need to issue headlines if temperatures are expected to go below freezing. For the possible freeze advisory needed, this is saying that there is some vegetation susceptible in your area, so freeze advisories might be a good idea. For instance, let's say that it's really only the very cold temperatures, less than 28, that you might need to issue advisories. So that could maybe be a reason for selecting the possible. And then finally, the last selection is yes, issue freeze advisory. So in this selection, you're stating that most vegetation is susceptible, so therefore headlines are encouraged if freezing temperatures are expected. So for the example, let's go ahead and select yes. And then there's a box below it that allows you to enter the rationale for your guidance. So this is really helpful if you do enter the rationale so that the National Weather Service can see why you are selecting whether you believe there should be headlines or maybe not be headlines. So just as the example, crops are susceptible to freeze and would be damaged if temperatures were 28 degrees or lower. So the information that you can provide as a vegetation expert is some of that detailed information that might not be known outside of the vegetation community, like the critical temperatures for vegetation in your region. Maybe a 32-degree freeze wouldn't matter quite as much as a 28-degree freeze. So this is the information that the National Weather Service really needs and the guidance that they're looking for from the local contributor. This bottom part here should already be filled out to you, so you should not have to change any of these fields. So once you submit the guidance form, where does this information go? Well, within a couple of minutes, the guidance form will be sent around to the listserv So everyone that's a part of the project will see that a new guidance has been sent around. Also, we have a more graphical way to look at these reports, the first of which are the static maps, and they're in the middle. The third section of maps on this page is called the Freeze Advisory Status Map. So this is where the guidance form information goes. We have one map for National Weather Service input and one for non-National Weather Service input. So when you submit a guidance form as a local contributor, this is the map, the non-National Weather Service input, where your information will go. So right now, since we just reset for the fall season, a majority of the country we have not received reports for from the local contributor. So that's why most of the map is tan. However, there have been a couple local contributors in Michigan and Indiana that have submitted. So let's go ahead and zoom into Michigan real quick. So the green color represents that this local contributor is suggesting that headlines would be needed if freezing temperatures are expected because vegetation is susceptible. The counties are filled in with dots depending on how long ago the report was submitted. If there are no dots within the county, that means that these reports were submitted within 2 days. If there's a low density of dots like we see now, this means that they were submitted within a week. And then a higher density of dots means that these reports are over a week old. If a local contributor has selected a maybe freeze advisories are needed, that would show up with blue in the county. And then finally, if they said that no freeze advisories would be needed because no vegetation is susceptible, that would show up as gray. So real quick, I wanted to show you, let's go back to the regional map. I wanted to show you the map for the National Weather Service input. So whenever a National Weather Service office submits guidance, this is the map that their guidance goes to. So when a National Weather Service office fills out a guidance form, what they are saying is that if temperatures got cold enough, whether they would issue freeze headlines or not. So it's the same color as the non-National Weather Service map, where the green represents offices that would be issuing freeze headlines. The blue represents offices that maybe will be issuing freeze headlines. And then finally, the gray colors represent offices that are not going to issue them for various reasons. So if you're interested in finding out in your region if the National Weather Service office is planning on issuing headlines, you can access this map. We also have a GIS interface map where you can get all the same information, but also a little bit more detail as well. So let me open that up real quick. On the GIS map, you'll need to zoom in a little bit closer in order to see the information. And let me go ahead and turn off the stations. And when you're looking at the GIS map, you can either choose for the guidance to look at the National Weather Service input or the non-National Weather Service input. I'm going to pan up to where we have the local contributor input and select that map. And if you turn on the legend, you can see that the color for the counties is very similar to the static maps that I just showed you. So one other feature that you can see on the GIS map is you can actually select the county. And in this box on the top right, it pulls up the latest information in terms of guidance reports. And if you select more information, you can see on this page the last 2 guidance forms that have been submitted. The first one is the National Weather Service saying that, yes, they are going to issue freeze advisories in this county if temperatures are freezing. And the one before that is just from a day previous on Tuesday when Brian Overstreet, who's an extension agent in Indiana, submitted a report saying that, yes, they are encouraged for Jasper County. If you want to look at the complete history for Jasper County, click that button that says View Input History. And this keeps all the records from going back to previous seasons as well. Okay. So as I said before, there's a different type of form called the impact form that you can also fill out as a local contributor. So once again, if you log in, you'll be able to fill out these forms. Press go. And then this time we're going to select the freeze impact report. And we'll look by state once again. And this time, let's select a different state and say Get Form. So once again, if you need to look at the counties, you can just open up the map and it will show the names. And you can either select individual or check all. And then there's a box to describe the freeze impact. So for example, some apple trees damaged by freeze on the morning, if I could type, sorry, of September 20th. And so then the next step is to select the date of the freeze and then the date that the impact was noted. So let's say it was the next day. Another option on the impact form is to fill out if you know the dollar amount for the loss. This is an optional field, so if you don't know it or if you don't want to share this information, that's fine. And finally, once again, this information should be filled out to you specifically. So once you submit the impact form, this information goes to very similar places as the guidance form. There is an email that's sent around to the listserv within a couple of minutes. And also, in a more graphical way, you can look at the impacts on the GIS map interface, which is the bottom right here. And once again, zoom in so that you can get the information for all counties. And if you open up the legend, you can see that the county is going to be colored depending on how many reports are submitted within the last 90 days. So after 90 days, they are cleared out from the map, but I'll show you where you can still get that information after 90 days. So just as an example, let's go ahead and select Brown County in Wisconsin. I'm going to close out of this real quick. Okay, so select more information on the right. And this shows that even though it was over 90 days ago, there has been a report for Brown County, and that was reported in May. If you want to look at all impacts for this county, just select here, and this will bring you to the page that lists all impacts. Right now, we just have the one. Okay, and before I move on, I just wanted to say real quick, Beth already mentioned it a little bit, but these reports are most useful for the project if they're up to date. So if you need to update throughout the season, whether you say right now that yes, advisories are needed, in the future, maybe in a month, you don't think they are needed anymore, please resubmit a guidance form so that the National Weather Service has the latest information to work from. Okay, the next thing I wanted to show you are the static maps that are available. On this page, you might notice a couple difference. One difference from last season is that we have expanded to a national map. A couple other features I wanted to show you before we look at the maps. If you did not want to look at the shading, you only wanted to look at the points, you can select that box on the top right that says Show Only Points, and you can just get the point data. You can also zoom in on any of these maps. And there's also a little tag on the top left that tells you when this map was last updated. And unfortunately, I'm not going to have enough time to go through all of these products today, so I do encourage you to take some time to visit the website and see what maps are available. There's 4 main sections, though. The first one is the current season freeze. So you can look at the current season freezes in terms of 28 or 32 degrees in different ways, like the date of the first freeze. You can also, for example, look at the days since the most recent freeze. Right now, since most of the country has not had a freeze this fall, the map is white in this case. The next set is the accumulated growing degree days, which you can look at since the most recent freeze this season. We have the modified growing degree days, and we also have growing degree days based on different temperatures. The third set of maps are the freeze advisory status maps, which we've already looked at, so I'm not going to revisit those. And then finally, the last set are the freeze climatology maps. So if you're interested in knowing the median date for the first freeze, or for instance in early years or late years, this is the section that you would want to visit. All of this information is also available in the GIS interface. Let me zoom in real quick. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the guidance just so we are only looking at the information that was just shown on the static maps. Let's go ahead and select climatology and show shading. And one other feature on this map that's really neat is that you can actually select a certain point, and in the table on the right, it will show the specific dates for that station for an early, a median date, or a late freeze in both the fall and the spring. And then finally, as a member of the listserv, you do have access to see the list of all other members of this project. And here on the bottom left, you can see a link to the members list. You do have to be a member of the listserv to see this, so you'll have to log in. Once you're there, you can either look at all states, at all members, or you can select, for instance, your state to see who else is a contributor. We have names, email, phone number, and also the type, which is who they work for. So you can sort by type, for instance, in Indiana, and you can see that we have quite a few extension agents, which is great. We also have quite a few National Weather Service. So this is a great page to visit if you are looking to see how many, for instance, local contributors you have to see if you can populate this a little bit more, which for most states, we do need more local contributors, so any help is greatly appreciated. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Beth real quick to finish up a little bit of the presentation.
Thanks, Molly. So yeah, I just have a few more slides to share. As local contributors, I know some of this sounds like it's very Weather Service heavy, and you know, what are you guys getting out of it as local contributors? But this is pretty critical to share that information with the forecast. Essentially, when a cold season is in full force, forecasters won't issue freeze awareness headlines. This is because the public already expects these freezing temperatures. It's during the transition period between the dormant season and the growing season when these episodic freeze events could occur and cause the most damage. So based on climatology alone, forecasters could determine the start and dates of these transition periods for when they should start thinking about issuing headlines or stop for the cold season. Climatology is virtually ineffective, though, when we have extreme or unusual seasons. Both last year, 2012, and potentially this year, 2013, represent examples of these unusual seasons. Because of the unusually warm February and March from 2012, plants started to respond to these warm temperatures much sooner than normally expected, making them at risk for an episodic freeze event earlier than normal. The late start to the growing season this year could make many plants vulnerable to freeze events later in the year than normal. So forecasters need the input from local contributors like you to know the level of plant vulnerability, susceptibility for an area to best plan for the issuance of freeze headlines for when a potential freeze event may occur. The more effective these headlines, the more potential to minimize damage with having that advanced warning. So this is a previous map before we extended everything nationally, but you can remember from the local input guidance maps that we've already shown you, we need your help. We need your help very much, and we need you not only to post guidance information throughout the growing season. You can see there's really only 3 categories, so you probably only need to submit a report 3 times at the minimum. But we also need a lot of support from you to try and spread the word about the project and bring in other people. They don't always have to be extension personnel. They could be, you know, your neighborhood farmer. They could be a nursery operator at Home Depot. You know, anyone you can think of that could give input on what they think would be most susceptible should a freeze event come through. So update, recruit, spread the word. We really need your help on this. And finally, we have an email address that if you don't remember my name or Molly's name, we've tried to simplify it where people could just email the vipinfo@illinois.edu, and that will get to any of us here at the MRCC. So if you are having problems using the tools, or if you have suggestions for products that you would like to see that would make things better for you, please let us know. Thank you so much for your participation, and at this point, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the question box, or if you want to vocalize it, you have a microphone, raise your hand, we'll see that it's raised, and we'll unmute you and invite you to talk. We did get a link posting from Greg Spoden up in Minnesota. Greg, let's see if we can unmute you somehow.
Okay.
Which,
second.
if you wouldn't mind saying a few things. All right, you should now be live, Greg. You want to share what the link is?
Hi, Beth. Thanks much. Yeah, I just wanted to point out that perhaps local contributors are not aware of the definitions of the Weather Service headlines, and it could be useful for them to understand the nomenclature of warning, watch, advisory, and that's what that link was about.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we'll post that on the listserv and probably put a link to it on the VI or the Frost Freeze page.
Great idea.
Very
Thank
good.
you. Thanks. And then Pat, thank you for the compliment. Excellent and informative presentation. Let's see. 1 second. Go. Oh, no, let's see. So what's, okay. Oh, and Laura just said, no questions. Thanks for a good presentation. So,
hey, thanks for that feedback.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. We are recording this, so we will post it online. I'll send out an email when we have those posted, along with a couple extra links and any more information I can think of. So please spread the word, and thank you for supporting us at this point. We're going to turn off now.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.